Welcome back to the deep dive. Ever feel like, the world just suddenly shifted, like everything you thought you knew was just gone? That's kind of what happened to the family we're diving into today, the Kuchars.
Yeah.
We're heading to China's Xinjiang region. It's home to the Uyghurs, a mostly Muslim ethnic group. And, you've all sent in some really amazing stuff, articles, research, even a podcast series. And it all paints this really vivid picture of this community facing some, well, really immense challenges.
It's wild, right? Like how global events, especially everything after 9/11, just had these ripple effects. And I mean, they really deeply impacted the lives of just regular Uyghur families like
Yeah.
Dokuchars.
It's like all the world's problems just landed right on their doorstep,
Yeah.
and it totally turned their lives upside down. So to kind of break down this whole complicated story, we're going to zero in on Abdulatif Kuchar. He's the patriarch of the family, and his story, well, it really sheds light on the struggles of the Uyghur people as a whole. And it shows us how history, culture, and politics all kind of got tangled up together to shape their reality.
Right.
So where do we even begin? Well, let's start with Abdulatif's family history.
Okay.
It's like something out of a book. Resistance, resilience, and those tough choices families have to make when everything around them is falling apart.
His grandparents were really active in the Uyghur independence movement way back in the 1930s and 40s. And to really get what's going on in the region today, you got to understand that period.
Right.
I mean, that's when all this tension that's been brewing for decades, it all started.
It's like their fight for freedom kind of echoed down through the generations and impacted everyone who came after them.
Definitely.
And you have Absley's father. I mean, imagine having to renounce your faith, your whole identity, just to get ahead in a place where everyone's looking at you suspiciously. That's the impossible choice he had to make.
It's a tough one, right? And so many Uyghurs face this, how to be true to themselves and their culture and also, make a life for themselves in a system that wants them to be someone else.
It's that constant battle holding on to your roots but trying to build a future for your family. It's a lot to handle. But even with all this family history, Abdulatif found love in Xinjiang, married Mariam, built a life there, even though his business kept taking him back and forth to Turkey.
That adds a whole other level to things, doesn't it? It's hard enough having a marriage across borders, but then throw in the politics, the fear of being separated. It's a lot.
It's like they were walking a tightrope, and the ground beneath them was constantly shifting.
A great way to put it.
And then, bam, 2001 hits. 9/11 changes the world, and for Abdulatif and his family, well, things started to unravel.
It's a major turning point for the Uyghurs. After 9/11, China started looking at their Muslim population differently, almost like they were the enemy. They used the war on terror as an excuse to tighten their control over Xinjiang.
It's like the world's fears suddenly got focused on them, and their everyday lives just became so dangerous. Every time Abdulatif went back to China, it was an ordeal. They interrogated him, questioned him about his connections in Turkey. It must have been terrifying.
Absolutely. Like you're constantly being watched, judged just because of who you are or where you're from. It's a terrible feeling.
And it wasn't just Abdulatif, right? We have stories from others like Kalbanor, a Uyghur woman who talks about her family being harassed just for openly practicing their religion.
Yeah. She was interrogated, detained for days, all because they suspected her of being an extremist. It's chilling.
It really is.
But this wasn't random. It was a calculated move by the Chinese government. They used what they called the People's War on Terror, started in 2014, I think, as a cover, to basically justify mass surveillance, detentions, and just controlling the entire Uyghur population.
It's like this darkness just descended on their community.
Yeah.
And any space for them to express their culture or religion just disappeared as China tried to squash anything they saw as a threat.
Mm.
And then we start hearing these whispers about this thing called the Black Gate.
Ah, yes, the Black Gate. It's this network of secret detention camps where they were sending Uyghurs without any trial, without any due process. It's truly disturbing.
The stories coming out of there are just horrifying. People being detained for things like having a long beard, wearing a veil, even applying for a passport.
It's insane. And these re-education camps, as the Chinese government calls them, they're all about forcing the Uyghurs to assimilate, to become something they're not.
Imagine that. Ripped from your family, your life, thrown into a camp because of your ethnicity, your beliefs.
And the scale of it is just mind-boggling. They think over 1 million Uyghurs have been detained in these camps. It's like they're trying to erase an entire culture.
It's heartbreaking. And for Abdulatif, this nightmare became all too real when they forced him to leave China. But his wife and kids, they were still trapped in Xinjiang.
It's a devastating turn in their story. He's stuck in Turkey, filled with worry, desperately trying to find out what's happened to his family.
His whole world just shattered,
Yeah.
and all he had left was hope. We'll dig deeper into Abdulatif's desperate search for his family in part 2 in this deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time we left Ablatif back in Turkey, and man, his heart was just heavy, just desperate for any news about his wife and kids, stuck over there in Xinjiang. I can't even imagine that feeling, not knowing if they're safe or suffering or even, well, alive. It's deafening, that silence.
It's a powerful weapon,
Yeah.
that silence. It's how they control the narrative, how they keep people in line. Families like Abdulatif's are just left hanging completely in the dark about the fate of their loved ones.
It's brutal. So what do you do when the whole world seems to have turned its back on you, when nobody's listening to your pleas for help? Well, if you're Abdulatif, you fight back. You
Yeah.
fight back with everything you've got.
Right.
So his first thought was to reach out to the Turkish government. Figured with the large Uyghur population in Turkey, the shared culture, they'd be sympathetic.
Right. It makes sense. Historically, Turkey has been a safe haven for Uyghurs fleeing persecution. But, and there's always a but, their relationship with China is complicated, to say the least. It's all tangled up in economics and politics.
Exactly. So while they offered words of support, there wasn't much action. Like they wanted to help, but didn't want to upset China.
It's a tough spot for a lot of countries. They want to stand up for human rights, but then there's the economic reality, the political fallout to consider.
It's a tricky balance. So what do you do when diplomacy fails? Well, Abdulatif turned to the one thing he could control, his story. He shared it with anyone who would listen. The power of the media, right?
Absolutely. When you can't go through official channels, you got to go public. You got to make some noise. And personal stories like Abdulatif's, they break through those walls of statistics and reports. They put a human face on a complex issue.
It's like shining a light into a dark corner, forcing people to see what's really going on. And it worked. Journalists, human rights groups, even some international organizations started paying attention. But, things move slowly, especially on the international stage. And while the world was debating and deliberating, Abdulatif was living through a nightmare.
Yeah, that's the frustrating part. These systems, they take forever to respond, while people like Abdulatif are suffering every single day.
Meanwhile, he wasn't just sitting around waiting. He was digging, scouring social media, reaching out to anyone who might have a piece of information about his family, just clinging to any sliver of hope.
Yeah.
And then a break. Word started spreading through the Uyghur community about this smuggled list, a list of detainees' names leaked out of China.
Those leaks, they're gold. They give us a peek behind the curtain, show us just how bad things really are in those camps. Of course, it's incredibly dangerous for whoever's risking their neck to get that information out.
I can only imagine what Abdulatif was feeling, waiting to see if his wife's name was on that list. It's like a horrible choice. You want the answer, but the answer might just crush you.
It's a cruel twist. Sometimes just trying to find out what happened to your loved ones can lead to even more pain.
And that's exactly what happened. Miriam's name was on the list. She was in one of those camps. The confirmation he'd been dreading.
Devastating news, but at least it was something. He knew where she was, could start focusing on how to get her out.
Right. But what about the kids? Still no news about them. It's a chilling thought, Children ripped from their parents, no one knowing what's become of them.
It's one of the most disturbing parts of this whole thing. Reports suggest that many of these kids are being put in state-run orphanages or boarding schools, forced to assimilate, to abandon their culture. It's just wrong.
It's hard to wrap your head around what those children are going through. Taken from their parents, forced into a completely strange environment where they're pressured to forget their language, their traditions, everything they know.
And the long-term impact on these kids, it's going to be devastating. They're losing their heritage, their right to just be kids, to be free.
It's just heartbreaking. And for Abdulatif, the fear for his kids, the not knowing, it was eating him alive. He was running out of options. He needed a miracle.
He was being tested, pushed to his absolute limit. But his love for his family, that kept him going, kept him fighting, even when all hope seemed lost.
And then, a stroke of luck, maybe fate, he bumped into this journalist who had deep ties to the Uyghur community.
It's amazing how these connections, these networks built on shared experiences, they can be lifelines when everything else fails.
This journalist, her name was Emily Feng, NPR's correspondent in China. She'd been covering the Uyghur situation and really knew her stuff. She had contacts, resources, and most importantly, she was willing to listen to Abdulatif.
That's huge because it shows that even when you're up against these massive, powerful forces, individuals can make a difference. Emily, she chose to use her position to help, to amplify the voices of those who were being silenced.
And Emily, she was fearless. She started digging into Abdul Latif's case, ignoring the risks, using her skills to try and find his missing kids.
Doing investigative journalism in China is no joke. You're under constant surveillance, facing threats, the possibility of being detained. It takes real guts to chase the truth in that kind of environment.
But she was determined. And eventually she found a lead. She tracked down some of Abdul Latif's relatives in Xinjiang who had been hiding the kids, keeping them safe.
It speaks volumes about the strength of the Uyghur community. Even with all the fear and pressure, they found ways to look out for each other to create these hidden networks of support.
It's a ray of hope in a really dark story. Can you imagine the relief Abdul Latif felt when he knew his kids were okay?
I bet it was like a weight lifted off his shoulders.
But the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Mariam was still locked up. And Abdul Latif, well, he wasn't going to stop until she was free. And this is where our deep dive takes a turn. We're stepping onto the world stage now, into the realm of international diplomacy and high-stakes politics. We'll unpack the final chapter of the Kuchar story in part 3 of our exploration. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're in the final stretch now, wrapping up the Kuchar family's story. We've come a long way from the heart of Xinjiang, through those shadowy detention camps, and now we're on the world stage, seeing how one family struggle gets caught up in global politics.
It's amazing how decisions made by world leaders, in those fancy rooms, can have such a huge impact on everyday people.
It really is. Last time, we saw that little glimmer of hope. Abdul Latif finding out his kids were safe, all thanks to Emily Feng's incredible work. But Mariam, his wife, she was still trapped in that camp. And Abdul Latif, well, he wasn't about to give up until she was free.
Right.
He knew he had to keep the pressure on, make sure the world didn't forget about Mariam and all the other Uyghurs locked away. So he kept working with Emily, telling his story to anyone who would listen.
That's so important, to keep talking, to keep pushing back against the silence, the cover-up. Abdul Latif's voice, with Emily's help, became this powerful force for truth and justice.
It's incredible how one person's story can start a whole movement. And that's kind of what happened. The world started to pay attention. Governments, human rights groups, even celebrities. Everyone was speaking out against what was happening in Xinjiang.
It shows you what can happen when people come together, raise their voices. It can make even the most powerful governments think twice.
Like a tidal wave, right? Building and building and then crashing down on anyone trying to stand in its way. And in the middle of all this, something amazing happened. After years of being locked up, Mariam was released.
Wow, what a moment. Not just for the Kuchars, but for everyone fighting for the Uyghurs. It proves that even when things seem impossible, hope and perseverance can win out.
Can you imagine what it must have been like for Abdul Latif to see Mariam again? To finally hold her after all that time?
It doesn't get much more powerful than that. Their reunion shows how strong family bonds can be, how love can survive even the darkest times.
It's a happy ending to a story that was filled with so much pain and uncertainty. But we can't forget that their story isn't unique. There are still so many Uyghur families torn apart, waiting for their loved ones to come home.
It's a reminder that this fight is far from over. We can't just sit back and think everything's okay now. We can't turn away from the suffering that's still happening.
So what have we learned from this incredible journey? For me, it's a reminder to never give up hope, even when the odds are stacked against you. We have to keep speaking out, fighting for what's right, even when it's hard.
You got it. And it's a call to action for all of us. What are we doing to support the Uyghurs? How are we holding those responsible accountable? These are questions we all need to ask ourselves.
The Kuchar family's story shows the strength of the human spirit, but it's also a warning about how fragile freedom can be. We have to stand up for the rights of everyone, everywhere. We can't let their story fade away.
If you've been touched by what you've heard today, we encourage you to learn more about what's happening to the Uyghurs. We've got some links in the episode description to get you started.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes where we'll keep exploring these powerful stories and digging into the issues that matter. See you next time.